and welcome to Open Door 6. And here I am on the roof of the Silvertown depot in East London. And that is because, in case you haven't already guessed, in this programme our main report will be on distribution, to show those of you on the receiving end and elsewhere in the trade what goes on behind the scenes at Charrington's distribution depots, and those of you in distribution depots around the Charrington region, two very different types of depot. We'll be looking at the largest, which is this one, Silvertown in East London, and at one of the smaller depots in Charrington region, that's St Ives in Cambridgeshire. First of all, though, the half-yearly results, and earlier on I talked to the financial controller, Colin Black, and asked him about the performance figures for the last 6 months. What were the general trends?
I think our performance for this first half year has been particularly good, actually. We're above budget and above plan.
So, to be more specific, how have things gone on the wholesale side?
On the wholesale, we've done, I think, particularly well again, but especially in the free trade, where our volumes are very satisfactory.
And what about figures for the retail side of the market?
And I think with good cost control that we've had in the managed houses by the managers and trade management, have allowed the good takings and the gross profit to come through to our profit before tax figures.
So presumably all of that has to be balanced against expenses. How is the company doing with those?
Well, our expenses, our general expenses, cover distribution, finance, administration, selling, marketing and advertising. And we must look very closely at those, keep those tightly under control, and to make sure that we meet our long-term targets of tightly under control, and to make sure that we meet our long-term targets of getting those down to somewhere around about the 50% mark of our gross trading profits.
So after expenses, with any money that's left, what happens to that?
Well, we've got to make sure that we look after the money that's left wisely and reinvest that into the business. We've always had this very strong policy of reinvesting the money, ploughing it back into the bricks and mortar of the managed retail outlets, investing into the free trade, as well as spending substantial sums on the depots and the offices.
After the launch of the feedback idea on Open Doors, Personnel Director Simon Turner's office has been deluged with opinions, statements and questions from people all over the Charrington area. Feedback is now being responded to in Toby time, so keep an eye out for that column. Well, now we move on to the main report of today's programme. Of the 7,800 employees in Charrington, 780 of them, that's 10%, are involved directly in the distribution function. Traffic clerks, draymen, drivers, warehousemen, administration staff, computer operators and maintenance people. This year, the distribution function will deliver 300,000 tonnes of beer, wines and spirits. And the vehicle fleet will clock up over 2.5 million miles in getting all those products to the customers. Charrington brings all its beer products into the southeast market from the 8 Bass breweries in the UK. Apart from the group beers, distribution brings in Swan Lager from Australia, cider from Taunton, and other brewers' products, mainly for the off-licences. Wines and spirits come mostly from the group's Hedges and Butler Company, and soft drinks from Canada Dry Rawlings. There are 9 distribution depots providing the delivery service to the trade: Norwich, St Ives, Foxworth, Basildon, Canterbury, Newhaven, Abingdon, Park Royal and Silvertown. Today we're looking in detail at the St Ives depot in Cambridgeshire and Charrington's largest depot, Silvertown in East London. Just under 600 Charrington employees work from Silvertown, with 329 involved in distribution. There are 99 draymen, 80 drivers, 59 warehousemen, 11 maintenance and 80 staff. Ronnie Taylor has been with Charrington for 7 years.
Started off in the wine and spirits, been there about 5 years, then I came out onto the beer transport. about 2 years ago. I started off as a picker. I used to assemble the loads on trolleys and put them in cages for the transport the loads on their lorries. Then vacancies come up on the beer transport, and I put my name in for that, and I got the job.
Been with Charrington about 7 years. I spent the first year in the beer warehouse on the empty bottle bank, and then a vacancy came up for a driver. Passed my HGV test and came out to join the fleet. First thing is check the lorry over and make sure I get it on the bank early, as there aren't enough loading bays for the lorries, and then basically wait for Ronnie to come over with a load sheet.
Come in just before 7, put some stuff in the lorry, not personal stuff. Go out to the traffic office about 7, pick up our load sheets. We go back over to the lorries onto the bank and give our loading sheet to a checker and load our lorry. Then drive around to the drive bank and do the same there.
Charrington delivers to about 2,500 customers every week from Silvertown, a mixture of pubs, clubs and off-licences. The product range contains over 100 beer lines and more than 800 wines and spirits. These modern curtain-sided vehicles are the latest additions to the Charrington fleet. By the middle of next year, almost all Silvertown's delivery vehicles will be curtain-sided. Before any products are loaded onto the vehicles, there are a number of crucial jobs to be done. Telesales, getting the orders from the customers and selling the special promotions. Dispatch office, receiving the orders, planning into loads so the traffic office can arrange delivery. Stock control, making sure the products arrive from all over the country at the depots when they're needed, without overstocking, so that the beer dispatched to customers has the maximum shelf life. Unloading trunkers and storing the products until they're needed for delivery. Silvertown handles 140,000 tonnes of beers, wines and spirits every year. Traffic, making the best use of the crew's time and the company's vehicles to satisfy the daily customer demand. And finally, vehicle maintenance. Inside this modern workshop, 7 fitters, the workshop foreman and garage manager look after the Silvertown fleet all the year round.
The main function while we're here is to supply the marketing company with an economic vehicle repair service. We maintain 130 pieces of equipment which is inspected 4 times a year. One of those inspections coincides with the Ministry of Transport test, and all repairs are done within the workshop with the exception of major accident repairs or 1 or 2 specialist items such as tachographs or major warranty work. We then supply as well an emergency cover for breakdowns within the Silvertown region.
Sometimes when we come back from the SEF to load up for the second turn, then if the 10 tonners are back, they obviously take a much larger amount of beer, and we find that the keg bank especially is maybe one out of this item or that item because of the volume. The 10 tonners taking it up.
We can see more on the open lorries than we can on the curtain-sided lorries. They are more awkward for us. It makes the job more difficult, really, for the checker itself.
Do you mind that?
Well, not really. I mean, it's a job's a job. Lucky to have a job at the moment, you know what I mean?
Ronnie and Steve are on their way to pick up the CO2 cylinders they need for today's deliveries. They're on their second run today and off to East Ham. We're going with them.
Average drops, I'd say anything between 6 and 10 drops a day. It does vary a bit. Average speed, depends on what part of London you're in. You can crawl along at 5 mile an hour certain places, and you can get up to 30 every now and again. Not often, but you can. Unless you're on major dual carriageways, it's the only time you can sort of move.
The Cock Public House is a Charrington managed pub on a busy part of the North Circular Road in East Ham High Street. There's a market stall outside and double yellow lines all round.
The place are pretty good, actually. They're quite good. Depends on the individual. But it is fairly typical pub. Double yellow bands and clear ways, you get all these sorts of problems. It's fairly typical.
You're working to your own speed on the transport. You can make a long day of it. You sort of spend, have a drink here and stop here for something to eat, or you sort of can carry on working right and sort of try and get an early day. It's the entire choice.
All right. Once we were challenged by a policeman who said we had to go on the double yellow band, etc. And we just had to stop the job there and then, pack up the gear and go. That was the end of that.
Ready? Yeah, below.
It's different if it's like a private motorist just popped off for shopping or whatever, then maybe it is taking a liberty. But someone who's just trying to do the work and will only be there maybe half hour, then it is a bit silly.
Over the country, delivery drivers are facing that sort of problem, but in fact it's the local authority and not the police who make the parking regulations, and usually the police will turn a blind eye to essential deliveries in restricted parking areas. And often the police will object to local authority proposals for parking regulations that they feel would be difficult, if not impossible, to enforce. Drayman make the job of delivery as easy as possible from your point of view?
Have a bit of patience when they arrive here, because it is a busy street and there's all cars parked here, and I have to get them shifted from the offices. People, customers drinking in the pub, I'd go in and ask them nicely to get them out without any aggravation from their point and mine.
But presumably you always know when the deliveries are going to be made?
No. Usually expect it about 7:15 Monday, and if it doesn't show when I'm up already, they phone me about 11 o'clock and say it's coming the next day.
So you'll have got up at 7:15, having got to bed what sort of time the night before?
1:30, 1 o'clock-ish, something like that.
Not much fun being a landlord, is it?
No. Has its good points, but has its bad ones as well.
Steve and Ronnie are off to their next drop now, and we're off to Cambridgeshire. Well, here we are 100 miles away from East Ham at a charming spot on the banks of the River Ouse, the site of a small hotel and restaurant called the Pike and Eel, a long-established free trade account in common with the majority of customers served by the St Ives depot. In fact, 93% of the depot's customers are free trade. With me is John Stafferton, who's the owner of the Pike and Eel. John, what do you look for in the kind of delivery service offered by your suppliers?
I think it's important that when placing your orders, the orders that come through are in fact the orders that you ordered.
And that they're on time too, I should think.
That's very important. I mean, you're ordering stock which is required for a certain date, and if you haven't got it, then you're in trouble.
Generally speaking, how does Charrington's fare in comparison with other suppliers that you deal with?
Well, being a free house, we do deal with a number of suppliers, and Charrington's works out very well.
So do you have any reservations at all?
Only that on certain items which are a low stock item, and we only need time, there are situations that you have to order a dozen at a time, and doing that's a lot of stock in stock which you don't need, and money involved.
In spite of the obvious differences between the Cock in East Ham High Street and here, the Pike and Eel just outside St Ives in Cambridgeshire, the Charrington J crews here in the east of England still have the same job to do, delivering Charrington products. This time to 650 customers, covering an area of something like 1,500 square miles. The St Ives depot area extends from Stevenage in the south to Stamford in the north, across to Cambridge in the east and Milton Keynes in the west. The longest trip takes a dray crew 120 miles to Leighton Buzzard, but an average run is 86 miles a day. Tony, you've previously worked at Silvertown. How does the job of distribution differ from life up here?
Well, it's quite a bit different, really, because we do wines and spirits up here, which we never did down in London, and the traffic is a lot quieter up here, no traffic jams. We're in Silvertown, so just outside the depot and you run into a traffic jam for a start. And then customers are entirely different up this way to what they are in London. And as a free trade work, we've got quite a bit of that in our depot. Therefore, we have to keep our ears to the ground where we hear of a customer which is thinking of getting a new brand in. We try and pass it back to management to get our own brand in before any other brewery does.
Roger, 1,500 miles is a tremendous area to cover. Are you involved in planning the routes?
No, it's all done in the office. Just done, the orders come in from Basildon to us, and then it's routed out. We as crews would like more involvement in the routing of the vehicles so that we could save time and fuel, because at the moment some of the routes are being crisscrossed, and we would like a little involvement as to where the vehicles go and the deliveries, not so much the parts of the area but in different towns, just to save mileage and time.
Well, Roger, Tony, thank you very much indeed. Well, we're off to the depot now. See you there. St Ives Depot distribution function employs 3 warehousemen, 11 drivers, 6 draymen, 2 floor managers and 4 staff in the office. Annual tonnage delivered 15,000, average weekly tonnage 300. St Ives doesn't have a telesales department. Orders are taken from Basildon and printed out via the DSS every morning at the depot. Ernie Callaghan is the dispatch controller. Ernie, in a depot of this size, how would you describe your job as dispatch controller?
Well, the main task of the dispatch controller is the smooth day-to-day running of the dispatch office, with liaison with other departments and giving the best customer service we can possibly give.
The depot's post-delivery clerk is the customer's link with the technical services department and the one who makes sure all the documentation is correct for the dray crews. But because of the size of the depot, Flick Claxton has other responsibilities too. Flick, tell us a bit about your job. What sort of things do you do?
Well, apart from dealing with the documents for the crews, I have to keep a check on the paperwork coming back into the depot. Breakages or goods returned for whatever reason, the customer didn't want it. Telex work, putting orders through on the telex for the stock, confirming the documents on the computer.
Are you in touch with customers very much?
Yes, I have to deal with customer complaints, TSD requirements if they have a problem.
You seem to be in touch with just about everybody in the depot. Is it a very friendly place to work?
Oh yes, very. Yeah, I met my husband here.
Everyone seems to have a very flexible attitude to their job.
Yeah, well, it has to be in a depot this size. We're all virtually interchangeable. If somebody's away or on holiday, you have to be able to slot in and cover their work as well.
In the St Ives Depot keg warehouse, trunkers from the Bass breweries and depots can be unloaded under cover. Alan Hall is the stock controller. Alan, how does the ordering procedure differ in a smaller depot like this from a larger one?
Well, the ordering procedure is fairly similar. We place our orders by means of the telex system on a Tuesday to our central operation at Burton to receive the beer the following week.
Are there any special problems when it comes to ordering?
Yes, one of the main problems we do get is on draft beer. We have to take special care on the best before dates, whereas in the small depot here we only get one delivery a week, and so we have to be that much more careful. Whereas in the larger depot they probably receive a delivery every day, so the turnover of fresh beer is that much more easier.
The 3 warehousemen pre-assemble the loads for the transport crews, who load their own vehicles the morning of delivery. Derek, we've already heard about how the beers reach St Ives. What about the wines and spirits? Where do they come from?
The wines and spirits come from Foxearth. This is a small village in Sudbury, in Suffolk. It was originally a brewery that Charrington's bought out, and they are now a wines and spirits operation that supply this depot and 2 other depots, and they run a retail fleet and draw their beer from elsewhere.
I should imagine that in a small depot like this that the atmosphere is pretty good, isn't it?
I think the atmosphere is very, very good. They all muck in together, they look after each other, they know their families, each family, and it's very much a homely, friendly atmosphere.
Do you think that because you're actually rather removed from the main Charrington area that makes you much more of a team and that the results are therefore that much better?
I think it does. I think that is the strength of it, and our figures will show that it is the teamwork and the atmosphere that leads us to be a successful depot.
Because of the distribution distances involved in the delivery area, the majority of crews only go out once a day in their fleet of 10-ton articulated vehicles. So, at the end of this visit to the depot here at St Ives, I'd like to ask Area Distribution Manager here, Derek Longstaff, just what is the difference between a smaller depot like this one and a large one like the one at Silvertown?
Basically, the problems encountered in a small depot and a large depot are exactly the same, although in the smaller depot, due to the remoteness of some locations and the number of staff and the wide area that we distribute to, we may have to rely more heavily upon the man on the spot, the depot manager, in this case Brian Cooksey, to solve the problems, but he can't do that without a good team behind him.
Flexibility seems to be a real key word here too.
I think flexibility is an essential quality if you're going to be part of a team in a small depot. For instance, if we take the clerical staff here, you may have noticed that each member must understand his colleague's job, not only to provide cover during sickness and holidays, but also to increase efficiency. Within the warehouse, each operator has his own area of responsibility. However, we can call transport employees in to cover as necessary. On transport, the transport crews recognise they are ambassadors for the company and go about their job knowing that the way in which they carry out their duties reflects upon the image of the company in the marketplace. And if in that marketplace they discover any bits of information which may be of use, they certainly bring them back to Brian Cooksey, who liaises with the trade department. That interdepartmental dialogue has helped produce a 20% increase in tonnage through this depot in the last 2 years.
Well, there we have it, 2 very different types of depot. And although some of the approaches and the attitudes to the job of distribution may be different, the job itself is still the same. Now, when we were at St Ives, I was very impressed with the great feeling of team spirit that was evident everywhere. And that's something I'd like to ask you about, Brian Ross. You're the distribution director. Is that team spirit only achievable, really, in the smaller depots, do you think?
No. Obviously, it's easier to achieve that at the smaller depots, but even in the large depots, like here at Silvertown, in distribution, we're very conscious of the need to provide good customer service, and the only way we can do that is to work together as a team.
Nowadays, everyone in Charrington seems to be talking about customer service. Why do you think it's so important?
Because we want to sell more beer. Customer service is a way of achieving that, and in a market which isn't growing very fast, if we're ambitious, and we are, then good customer service can bring us more business.
If you're planning to improve customer service, does that mean that you have to spend more money on distribution?
No, we're not going to be spending more money on distribution. We already spend around £16 million a year on the service, and that's a great deal more than our counterparts in the rest of the group. You'll see from the slide that our average distribution cost is running around £54 per tonne, and that compares to £37.50 elsewhere in the group.
So why should it be so expensive in the Charrington area?
Well, you've seen some of the problems which our London depots have to face when you've been filming here at Silvertown. But apart from that, I'm convinced that there's considerable scope for improving the efficiency of our distribution operation, and we've got to face up to those challenges if we're to remain competitive in the longer term.
I'm quite interested to hear you use the word competitive there, because presumably you're only distributing Charrington products, so who are you competing with?
Now remember that we also provide the distribution service for other companies, for Bass-off licenses, for Bass sales customers. We provide the service for Crest Hotels, and from October for the new catering company. When we provide a distribution service on their behalf, we get paid the market rate for doing that. And that means that if we're to retain that business in the long term, we've got to be competitive.
Brian Ross, thank you very much indeed. And thanks to all of you who've helped us to make Open Doors 6. Open Doors 7 will be coming along in a few months' time, and then the main report will be on how Charrington manages the property side of its business. So until then, goodbye.